I was doing a long road trip for work several years ago, something I did frequently in my previous position. Winter had just begun, and I saw it start to snow as I was driving down the road in the dead of night. Soon, there was a lot of snow falling, adhering to the ground and making the road extremely slick and hazardous to travel on. The weather wasn't anything I had been thinking about, but I was aware that continuing would be risky at this stage. In the hopes of finding motels or whatever, I decided to get off the highway at the following intersection. Sadly, there weren't any. The only stop after that was a truck stop. Nevertheless, I entered there from the highway and noticed a sizable number of vehicles and trucks there. Due to the snow and the number of people leaving the highways, the area was beginning to get crowded. I turned back, parked in an available space, and decided to just stay there while going outside in the snow. I had been on this popular route before, so I assumed it would be plowed overnight. I wandered straight out to my vehicle after using the restroom inside the truck stop. As I was doing it, I could immediately tell that my car had received about an inch of snowfall. I climbed inside my car and started covering the windows. Every time I slept in my car, I followed the same procedure. I used some blankets I had to cover all the windows so that no one could see inside the car at all. Then, because I had many extra blankets in the back of my car, and it was just big enough for me to settle down there, I didn't worry too much about becoming chilly. It did not take much for me to nod off when I closed my eyes. But at some point throughout the night, I did wake up. I was oblivious to the time. I had been getting good rest, so I was aware of the cause of my awakening. The blankets prevented me from seeing out of any of my windows. I noticed that my car's exterior was making a scratching noise. It increased in volume. It seemed to be on the driver's side of my vehicle. After a brief pause, I heard somebody attempt to unlock the driver's door of my car. As this had never occurred before, I was not entirely sure how to react. I stayed there still for approximately a minute as the person who was there attempted to unlock my car's doors one at a time. The fact that my automobile was locked made me very happy. I considered calling the police while I took a peek at my handset. When the noises ended around 4 o'clock in the morning, I heard a big thud emerge from the back window beside me. Fortunately, the glass didn't crack, but I was still concerned, so I hopped inside, sat in the driver's seat, and turned the key. I yanked the cover off the window and started my car. I could sense myself slipping as I moved through the snow. I noticed someone when I appeared in my mirror, but I could not make out any details about them. They were about 40 feet behind me. It was snowing, and it was dark. Even though the road was less slick than it had been before, I kept driving on it because it was still softly snowing. I drove up approximately 20 kilometers slowly and cautiously to a municipality with a motel and spent the remainder of the night there. I remember going snowboarding with my younger brother when I was a youngster. Whenever it snowed, we could stroll to a hill in a park that was a few streets away. We would go there each time it snowed, and the local children would also go there. When I was around 10 years old, my younger brother, who was 2 years my junior, and I saw the snow starting to accumulate. It was already becoming dark. But because it was a Saturday, we were certain that the following day would be jam-packed with children. So we inquired as to whether we may travel that evening. Having looked, I can't remember the precise hour, but I believe it was between 8 and 9 o'clock. We could, but we had to return in an hour, my mother added. I put my winter jacket and snow pants on before my brother, and I headed to the hill with our sleds. We probably walked to the park for 10 minutes. Additionally, the snowfall increased in intensity as we were moving. When we arrived, it started to rain. We then saw that there was no one else at all in the park. The hill was covered with new snow. I went to the top first, followed by my brother, and we raced down. It was wonderful to have the entire park to ourselves as we repeatedly descended and then ascended. On one of the occasions we climbed to the peak of the hill, we saw a guy standing down towards the base. He was a long distance away, Yet all he seemed to be doing was gazing at us. An abandoned park during a snowstorm at night, with only one guy standing at the foot of the hill looking, seemed a little odd. Before sliding down the hill again, my brother and I opted to wait for a few seconds to determine whether he would leave. He remained standing there for at least 1, perhaps 2, minutes before ultimately moving roughly 15 feet away and sitting down on a park bench while still keeping an eye on us. The man seemed shady, and my brother and I were raised to be cautious around outsiders. We decided to go down the slope one last time before leaving the park and heading home. As we descended, I had a better glimpse of the guy. He appeared to be quite elderly, but I could not tell much more about him because of the snowstorm and his large coat. Then my brother and I strolled outside the park and went home. We made the approximately 10-minute trek home in the snow. As we arrived at our house, after returning inside, we had some hot coffee. Following that, we prepared for bed. I saw a person we had observed in the park standing at the corner of our lawn on the street and gazing into our house as I was walking down the corridor from the restroom to my bedroom. I contacted my brother, and we saw the guy leave exactly as he arrived. He didn't do anything else, like get in a car. He simply moved along the street, but he was never spotted after that. I was 15 when it occurred. When I returned home from school one day in November as a senior in high school, I discovered I was living alone. My mother had left a message in the diary letting me know she and my father were out buying groceries and would return later that evening. I was rather happy when she gave me some cash to get food. I completed my schoolwork before ordering food and watching TV. I then indulged in some video gaming. Early in the day, snowfall had been occurring, and by 8 p.m., it had started to rain. I carried on playing video games until my mother eventually contacted me at around 9 in the evening to let me know she was on her way back home, but would not be there for the next hour or two due to the snow. To find out how much we had received, I decided to step outside and see. I also intended to perhaps plow the driveway. A few inches of new snow covered everything when I went outside the front door. Apart from this one area, everything was quite smooth. On my lawn, I discovered several snow-covered footprints. Someone appeared to have entered my yard before crossing the street to the garage. I found it unusual. I usually go back inside when I see someone on my lawn, but this time I got the sudden idea to inspect the garage door that was attached to our home. I stepped inside after seeing that it wasn't locked. I moved closer to lock it, but as I did so, I noticed a sound coming from the opposite side. I immediately hurried upstairs to my room since I was so terrified. I went under my bed and shut the door. I heard the sound of my garage door opening a moment later. I desperately longed for my parents to come home, but I knew it would be a while. I could hear someone moving about downstairs in my home. I decided to contact the police at that time. Fortunately, I had my mobile phone with me, and I called 911. I prayed that whoever was downstairs wouldn't hear me as I talked as discreetly as I could. They were moving around below for quite some time, but I could hardly hear them. What they were doing eluded me, but I was cursing myself for not checking the garage door earlier to make sure it was locked. The moment I heard footsteps coming up the stairs, I hid upstairs beneath my bed because I was more terrified than ever. Up until the point when I finally heard the distant sound of police sirens. The footsteps appeared to leave after returning downstairs. I didn't leave my bedroom till the cops entered my home. When I did, I noticed that our home's main floor was completely damaged. After being called, my parents arrived home a little later. It appeared to be a routine break-in when a man was looking around our home for valuables. I'm simply pleased I was able to ascend and phone the cops at that precise moment.